a late finisher, were you? Oh, okay. Good. Okay, so our meeting is reconvened. We've got further submissions through until just after 1 o'clock. So let's get into it, and if we could have Timothy Elder to the table. Is Timothy here? Welcome, Timothy. Are you a Tim or a Timothy? Tim, good to have you here. Thank you for coming in on a Saturday morning. We've got about 10 minutes. You can assume that members have read the written submission you've provided.
Yep.
Over to you how we use the 10 minutes, but the more of it you spend talking to us, the less we'll have to question you. So good morning and welcome once again.
Cool. Happy for discussion afterwards, would be good.
Sure.
So just a quick summary of my submission. I'm going to just talk very briefly about the submission itself, tell you a little bit about me, my perspective looking at this particular document, and then tell you about why I think it's a bit odd, I guess. So my submission was based around concern for the undermining of democracy in New Zealand, in particular the veto powers, the ability to suspend, amend or revoke RMA documents, council plans and other documents, continuing that on from the last 5 years for another 5 years. So I'm a game designer. What I do is design games, clearly. And it's one of the most misunderstood roles. It's even misunderstood within the industry as well. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it actually involves. It's not designing graphics or necessarily programming. But what I do is I evaluate game design choices. And I determine what the implications of those game design choices are. All right, so game design is defined as a series of interesting choices, right? Or games are defined as a series of interesting choices by Sid Meier. More broadly, a set of rules and conditions. Okay, so you've got think of chess. Chess is not the pieces on the board or the board itself. It doesn't matter whether it's wood or plastic or glass or a piece of paper with a little symbol drawn on it. The game of chess is the series of rules and the conditions and the victory conditions and what each thing can do, what each thing is able to do, and those are the rules of the game. And when you change the rules of the game, you change how players play the game. They're going to make different choices when you've got different rules. So when I look at this particular legislation, in particular that veto power is going to shift how people play the game. People are going to, of Canterbury, I think we can probably all agree that what we want people who are planning, so NGOs, council, communities, when they're making plans and putting together plans, we want them to be focused on making sure that those plans create the best outcomes for Canterbury, to make Canterbury, Christchurch, communities as good as possible. And how can those plans do that? That should be the primary top priority. So when I look at this change in the rules, or it's in fact continuing those rules, what I see those powers doing is changing that focus, changes those people who are trying to make those plans that make Canterbury awesome are going to have to pragmatically and rationally consider instead, how do I make sure that these plans don't get vetoed by the government? Okay, they're going to be focusing on that because they're going to need to, because if the minister has the power to just say, nah, that's not going to happen, that's going to completely throw away huge amounts of work, huge amounts of constantly, presumably, council, NGOs are consulting with stakeholders, community, whoever might actually have an interest in it, and that's huge amounts of work. And for the minister to be able to say, no, that's going to diminish that. They're also going to be concerned about how they protect their goals and dreams from the minister suspending those plans. Just no, suspending it, dismissing it, or even amending it, changing it, that may or may not still hold the core principles of the plans and what they're trying to achieve. So functionally what that does is make central government, not local government, not regional government, but central government a bottleneck filter in the recovery process, because everything has to get through that. So when you change the rules of the game, you change how people play the game. I've been doing a little bit of research on this online, and I found this group of people who seem to really support and share my concerns based on what they say they value. What they say they value is a place that creates opportunities for all New Zealanders to reach their personal goals and dreams. They value loyalty to our country and its democratic processes. They value individual freedom and choice, which is a little bit undermined by this veto. They also value limited government, not putting government in the way between people and their goals and their outcomes. And I really support those values. I think those values are awesome. And I really wish somebody in Parliament actually held those values, which is where I get a little bit confused, because that was from the National Party website. Okay. So I'm going to say here, when I see what somebody says...
We could espouse those values, I suppose.
Well, when I see what somebody says they value, and I look at somebody's actions that contradict those values, all right, pushing for this veto power, I have to go on the side of what the actions are. What are people doing, not what are people saying. So yeah, my question is, if the government truly supports that, truly support the democratic values that they themselves say that they value, are they actually going to support that in their actions? Or are they going to be complicit in the erosion of the foundations of that democracy that we currently have? Cheers.
Thanks, Tim. Now, other questions, members? Paul.
Thank you. I noticed at the start of your presentation you mentioned the great game designer Sid Meier.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you'd tried Civilization 5 and if there's any comparison with rebuilding Canterbury.
I hadn't considered it. No.
It's a similar genre, really.
Well, yeah, Civilization is interesting because you're effectively a totalitarian dictator as a player. Yeah. The people, the digital
But no, sorry, actually, on a more serious vein, coming to the question of limited government,
yep.
I absolutely hold those values, but at the same time, given the wider tax-paying public of New Zealand are putting in $16.5 billion of the country's money targeted on, particularly around some of those anchor projects and critical infrastructure and the Canterbury rebuild, isn't it appropriate that the Minister would, representing the whole country, have a very clear role in...
You definitely have a very clear role, and definitely the Crown has a stake, is definitely one of the stakeholders in the rebuild process. I think this goes beyond that though, because it pretty much says any plan, anything, even if it's not necessarily involving government, they can just say no. So I think definitely Crown involvement is incredibly important. And as you say, there's a huge, general taxpayer involvement. So yeah, definitely that makes the Crown, the government, a significant stakeholder. But I'd rather that was a stakeholder, not a bottleneck.
Eugenie.
Thank you for a very original submission. Just interested in this game theory, and you said that if you change the rules, it changes the way people play, obviously.
Yep.
In terms of your experience with computer games, we've got a veto...
Games in general.
Games in general, a veto power. Can you just elaborate on how it changes the way people play the game?
Well, it was more of a broad statement that any rule you change, no matter tiny rules, they can make quite a significant impact on how players choose things. I mean, take soccer, for example. The simple fact of being able to hold the ball completely changes the game. It's one small rule. So yeah, just as I said, the veto power, the ability to just say, no, we're not going to do that. Just the fact that exists as a possibility is going to change, any rational player of the game thinking through what are the odds of that actually happening. And if the odds of that are happening are actually nil, why even have that there?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tim, thanks very much. We've used our time, but thank you for a really good submission and a pretty cool T-shirt.
Yeah.
Thank you.